On February 9th, 2007, it was reported that a man in Forsyth, Illinois would be legally changing his name to that of Indiana Colts quarterback Peyton Manning. The man, a diehard Chicago Bears fan, had signed a public pledge the prior week, vowing to adopt the name of his nemesis should the Bears lose the Super Bowl. When that impossible outcome did occur, the man began the legal proceedings immediately. "I made the bet," he said, "and now I've got to keep it." 875 miles away in New York City, the federal government prepared to test a new defense program guarding against nuclear attacks. This is What a Year. Welcome to What a Year, the show where we pick a year and spend 10 episodes assembling a time capsule of movies, music, and other cultural odds and ends. I'm Ethan Warren.
And I'm Ryan Pollie.
And this week we are talking about our second contributions to the 2007 time capsule, Akiva Schaffer's Hot Rod and Dan Deacon's album Spiderman of the Rings. Plus, I will be testing Ryan's knowledge of the most important figures of 15 years ago. And if you stick around until the end, we'll have a conversation with the cartoonist and podcaster Branson Reese, who is contributing the webcomic Achewood to our time capsule. So let's get into it.
All right, so why don't you take the wheel here, talk to me about Hot Rod, because obviously I've got some issues with it, but also adore it in ways too. Tell me about 2007 and Hot Rod for Ethan Warren, and then we'll move back to me.
2007 and Hot Rod. I mean, this movie was a hugely anticipated thing for me because I loved the Lonely Island guys going back to 2005.
Was that Mr. Pippin Red Vines equals Crazy Delicious year?
No, that would have been 2006, I want to say. Like January 2006, we have Lazy Sunday, which...
Okay, that's what I was referring to, yes.
It's like you can't kind of overstate how seismic that video was for what it is now, which is just like it's a rap about
YouTube.
Two guys, yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
So, but we got to jump farther back than that.
So, yeah, what does Lonely Island 2005 look like? Are they a sketch group?
Well, what I first discovered was I was at my friend Bob's house watching TV in the basement. We were watching Comedy Central Premium Blend, and this guy comes out to do stand-up, and his name is Andy Samberg. And he just has like 5 minutes of stand-up. And I just remember watching and being like, these jokes are kind of terrible, but this guy is a star. And then my friends and I back in the dorm discovered Awesome Town, which was the first attempt at the Lonely Island pre-SNL to kind of get on the map. They were these three guys, I mean, you know, Akiva Schaffer, Jorma Taccone, and Andy Samberg, who are three guys who go by the name The Lonely Island as a comedy group, met when they were in middle school and have just been... Oh, yeah, they've been making comedy. I think they were came out of Berkeley, California, yeah. And have just known each other since they were kids. And a lot of that comes through, I think, in them being in the right place at the right time, which is kind of my big idea with The Lonely Island and why they're important and why their movie goes in the time capsule, is they were perfectly primed, like, to be grabbing camcorders and making little sketch comedy like we all did. And then they took advantage of YouTube right at the emergence, or even pre-YouTube. They took advantage of online file sharing for their comedy in a way that at this point now
hadn't done. Like, yeah, it was.
The State was on MTV. Yeah, this is before.
Yeah,
or The State is before. Yeah, and it's even before Tim and Eric. Like, you look at Hot Rod, and there's a huge Tim and Eric overlap. It feels like.
Sure.
But Lonely Island was making stuff years before Tim and Eric Awesome Show. Hot Rod comes out the same year as Awesome Show.
That moment, that is shocking to me. For some reason in my brain, Tim and Eric has been on since 99, or you know what I mean? Like, they seem such old heads. But the funny thing is that moment in my favorite moment of the film, that the second musical number, remind me again what the song is called?
Oh, You're the Voice by John Farnham.
So when those three people, very typical looking people, are singing the song in the middle of the street, that was the most like Tim and Eric light bulb that went off in my head, but it felt very, very fresh to them and very like, you know, I can tell with this movie, no matter what they do, they think it's funny. And that's all that really counts is they're making themselves laugh. And I can tell they're having a freaking blast doing it. And that's what's important about it. And you can tell that in those sketches too. Like, and I love that, like whenever Andy goes on Seth Meyers and they talk about the SNL sketches that like just never went on air, or like how nobody thought that their jokes were funny. Like they have this connection where it really brings out this thing where like Andy making a joke that people doesn't think is funny. It's not a surprise to him. It's kind of like it seems almost like half the game to him. Like he's like, oh yeah, like that idea, like I think it's funny, but the point is that you don't, that it's too far, that, you know, like he loves that shit. And I applaud that in a big way. But then as far as him being he's like Kyle Mooney, or he's like Pete Davidson, right? Because he's young too, and he's cute. To watch him have such command of comedy enough to like get Natalie Portman to do what she did on SNL, or like just, I don't know, he had such his own voice on SNL. And I'm sure that came from being able to make videos with your middle school friends until adulthood. I mean, that type of comfort, that type of security in we think this is funny, who cares what anyone else thinks, is so important, I think, for a comedic voice, because it's so lonely and vulnerable out there. I would think that to be able to make comedy specifically with people that you really trust and love you and think you're funny, that's got to be really lovely.
Well, I read some interview with Akiva Schaffer, who is rarely on camera. He's the writer-director more.
Yeah,
so.
I can picture him in my head.
Yeah, with him and Andy, where they basically, the interviewer was saying, did you have kind of an advantage making this movie because you guys have known each other forever and you've been making stuff forever? And Akiva's answer was like, I mean, probably, but I have no idea because I've never done it any other way. All this was about was we've always known since we were kids.
Now they do.
Yeah, they've done stuff without each other.
Seems like Yorma's thing. And like when I letterbox, there seems to be a split between those two specifically, Yorma and...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything deliberate. I think it's just everybody's got to work, and Andy was doing Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and it's, you know...
Yeah, and But they do have their individual voices. I mean, Lonely Island feels very Lonely Island, but it is cool to look at their individual work, you know, and like it's similar, but it's different too. It's fun. It's fun that they were able to branch out and meet new people and work with, you know.
Yeah, I mean, why is MacGruber a Yorma movie instead of an Akiva movie is an interesting question.
Yeah.
And what else has Akiva done?
And what is this movie? A Yorma movie?
This is Akiva.
Hot Rod? This is an Akiva movie.
Yep, and Akiva,
MacGruber's Yorma.
And I think Akiva directed Popstar too, their other movie, the second Lonely Island joint, which took another 10 years to come out after this one.
Yeah.
But we're all over the place because there's so much to talk about with these guys.
Totally. So you're a Bates sophomore now.
I'm a freshman, and I'm watching these videos on whatever we had before YouTube.
Yeah, that makes me think too, like where you saw them.
So they were making these online videos. They tried to get a pilot on both Fox and MTV called Awesome Town that was going to be a sketch show that was very conventional, but now looks kind of like an audition reel to do what they eventually did, which was go on to SNL and basically invent this format that now still is in existence, the digital short.
Yeah.
And was Lonely Sunday was that the very first digital short?
I think so.
If not, it was the first one anyone paid attention to.
Unless you consider like Will Ferrell dog food commercials digital shorts. Like the commercials were always
pre-filmed. The commercial parodies have always been a different thing.
Yeah, so you're not considering a digital short as pre-film material. You're considering it a very special new thing. And what separates it from normal pre-film material?
Well, that's actually a great thought because it is the term digital short, which didn't exist. It's so weird to think about this. It didn't exist for all intents and purposes before right around this time, 15 years ago. What they're saying with a digital short is we're taking a YouTube sketch and we're just going to jam it into the middle of the show with a laugh track.
Yeah, that's weird that they called it a digital short.
Yep. And Lazy Sunday would have...
Because it's airing on TV.
Yep. But so what they're acknowledging is we are taking these three guys who live online and their voice is very online-y. And now they've done the same thing. They're done the same model with Good Neighbor, right? That's the Beck Bennett, Kyle Mooney troupe.
100%.
once the Lonely Island moved on, they shifted in Good Neighbor.
Workaholics had a similar path with doing a sketch show on YouTube and getting plucked to do Comedy Central.
I'm thinking specifically, though, about SNL that's now built a niche in.
But I just mean other companies that copied it, to the sense where Scotch Moses was like, who is an incredible comedy group that consisted of my former roommates and friends, not former friends, still friends, but former roommates and people that I know in Los Angeles. And the goal was, well, this is the new model, and it's doable, and it's not proven to not be the model anymore. Although some could say, not as much anymore. Although the new kids on SNL, who are now being pitched almost as the new Lonely Island, I think they were also the same model as well. And we're doing online sketches.
Yeah, Good Neighbor was the new Lonely Island, and now these guys are the new Good Neighbor.
Exactly.
And I think Lonely Island essentially created that. And it is cool that they were able to carve out that thing within this institution of Saturday Night Live and create this new avenue. And those things, I think, also were just designed to be shared online. It's like, not just that we're taking voices from online and putting them on SNL, but we're then going to design this to be shared on YouTube the next day.
Sure. And to be honest with you, that's how I currently digest SNL.
I think most people do.
Yeah. I don't click Peacock and watch it. I get sent the good ones, or if I want to see a certain guest, I go to their YouTube channel and I watch the sketches with some ads. Yeah. And that's how I watch SNL. And I think that was the start of it. It's almost confusing now. It's like, I can almost imagine them with their first meeting with Lauren, and he's like, "The internet boys."
Yeah. Well, and so then, Lauren is the good bridge to the development of this movie, which is, so they're at SNL. Meanwhile, this lady, Pam Brady, the esteemed and
she's the mom in the Brady Bunch, or the maid?
She's the dad. That's what's really interesting.
She's the dad in the Brady Bunch.
Yeah. No, Pam Brady is a writer for South Park.
Yeah.
And has written for lots of other TV comedy, but has collaborated a lot with Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And she wrote this script essentially called Hot Rod, essentially as a Will Ferrell vehicle. This was part of the sort of great Will Ferrell spec script race, where he had broken out with Elf, and then he followed that up with Anchorman. Broken
Elf
out as sort of
before Anchorman?
I believe it was.
No Shot.
No Shot? All right, well, shots fired. Elf was 2003. I know that because I saw it on a date with my first girlfriend.
Anchorman's got to be before it.
Is 04. No, it's a year. Elf is the year before Anchorman.
That is crazy to me to think about.
Yeah. And so everybody wanted to make Will Ferrell vehicles, and we end up with Blades of Glory gets off the ground, Talladega Nights gets off the ground, and Hot Rod was in the mix of things that were supposed to be.
Sure.
As the sort of the mediocre white man.
Yeah, like you could imagine
that he had carved out.
Nacho Libre being for Will. You could imagine you could even imagine the new Lakers show being for Will.
Yes, you can. I think Will Ferrell. Yeah, Will Ferrell would also imagine that. What a sad story.
I know.
Go look that up, listeners.
Friends. Yeah.
Too sad. Yeah. So Pam Brady writes this script, and it doesn't get off the ground with Will Ferrell. And so Lorne Michaels buys it off of Paramount and says, "I'm going to give this to the Lonely Island guys. I'm going to say, guys, do you want to make
it off of Paramount?"
Lorne Michaels buys the script off of Paramount and says, "I'm going to set this up with my three guys." And he is intentionally saying, like, I think he says, like, these guys are the future of comedy. And so we are going to take the now of comedy and we are going to hand it to the future and see what happens. Cool. And so they take this script. Pam Brady is the only credited screenwriter on Hot Rod.
What?
But if you read the script alongside the movie, as I did,
very different.
Like, every once in a while, they'll sort of intersect, but very rarely, and where they intersect is very different.
Story or comedy wise?
A lot of the jokes, it's so interesting, like both and neither and everything. Mm-hmm. So the whole setup of what is the plot of Hot Rod is there's a wannabe stuntman who has to jump 15 buses to save his stepdad so that he can kick his stepdad's ass. And that's all Pam Brady. The whole extended fight scenes.
Actually, that's very funny because that also kind of sounds like a South Park joke too. Like,
totally.
I want to save your life so that I can beat you to death is yeah, that's very funny.
Yeah.
That's a great
There's so
joke.
much South Park in this movie. Like there's
but that's the funny thing is, you know how I was trapped in the quote unquote originality of it. This just goes to show that without these kind of things in your head, you would never stumble upon that thought. So it's actually something I need to get over. Because, like, for example, you could say, well, here you are talking about Napoleon Dynamite, but did you pick up any on the South Park influence? And I would, if I were being honest, I would have been like, no. But now that you mention it, you know, and for some reason the Napoleon thing and all that other stuff was blaring to me. And here you go, a South Park writer wrote it, and I didn't think of South Park once.
Well, I think what it comes down to with Napoleon Dynamite is this aesthetic interest in like wood paneled homes and little carvings of bald eagles on tables and this very 80s influence. These like, this world seems to have kind of gotten stuck in the 80s.
Yeah. I hear that, but I could see that in like Royal Tenenbaums too. Like,
well, Wes Anderson was talked about as an influence on Napoleon Dynamite at the time.
Oh,
like,
fair. Okay,
this
cool.
is just
so
a guy who's doing the same thing. Yeah,
yeah. And I just have to keep reminding myself that I'm a little child brain at the time, so I don't even know if I know who Wes Anderson is in 2007. I'm not sure if I know, like definitely far from seeing Bottle Rocket or or discussing film in this way.
Sure.
So at the time, but looking back, that totally makes sense. But I would say that the influence that I hear in Napoleon Dynamite has more to do with the style and tone of the actual humor itself, right? And it's that thing where it's like you're laughing because this guy's like weird and like talks like whiskey and like I don't know, and maybe their hair is similar and they're both like gangly white kids and they wear headbands and like sweatbands and vintage. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. It probably does have to do with style, but I think it has to do with tone too. I do.
It does have to do with tone, and I think it has to do with an interest in. When I say aesthetic, it all comes back to the same stuff, which is like it's an interest in VHS culture and glitchy, what it looks like when a VHS gets too old and glitches a little bit.
Totally.
Like,
you know what else reminds me of Napoleon? What's the Danny McBride fists of
the Foot Fist Way?
Yes, there it is.
The Foot Fist Way.
Napoleon writer?
No.
But Uncle Rico's in it?
I don't know what the connection is. Jody Hill did Foot Fist Way and Jared Hess did Napoleon Dynamite.
But that feels a little Napoleon Dynamite too. Maybe you know what I'm thinking is I found Napoleon Dynamite and said this is it. This is original and this is new and this started something. But maybe it was in the air. Maybe people were presenting comedy in a way that you could watch something else and be like, that's so Will Ferrell. But like a lot of comedy was Will Ferrell and quote comedy at that time. Yeah. So maybe I'm just not, And I mentioned Wet Hot American Summer too. Maybe these were just milestones for me earlier in life.
So you clearly want to position Napoleon Dynamite as the big bang of something, which I think it kind of is. I think what it is it's both extremely stylized and extremely deadpan. Mm-hmm. And the same is kind of true of Wes Anderson. The Royal Tenenbaums has that, what is a vote for Pedro shirt, if not the equivalent of a Wes Anderson outfit, Chaz. Sure. Chaz Rushmore, Chaz Tenenbaum's,
the
tracksuit.
Yeah. Or like Richie with the sweatband.
Sure. And so there's some of that here with the distinctive costuming on Rod, but also in it's, he's got a friend who's got all those t-shirts of like wolves howling at the moon, and he's got a friend who's always wearing camo fatigues. It's this very like middle America, if not like sort of upper Northwestern.
That's a great point too. Setting is a really, really important part of that. Although Royal, no, but with these two films that I'm arguing are similar. Setting is a very important part. This is Bumblefuck. Both take place in Bumblefuck.
Well, very specifically in the case of Hot Rod, shot in I think British Columbia, which gives it this like really fascinating feeling to it. It's like it feels like Bumblefuck America, but it's
I would have guessed like
Bumblefuck
Kansas
Canada.
or the South because of Bill Hader's accent, and like almost sometimes Andy Samberg kind of has a Southern twang. It's almost like they're kind of making fun of the American South a little bit But yeah, the funny thing is like, yeah, in Napoleon, there is no wink, but I swear to God, in some of these scenes, I can tell they're about to laugh at each other, which brings me joy. And that's that SNL feeling too of Hader and Sandberg, of that they love each other. And that's what I get from Hot Rod that I don't get from Napoleon, that I don't get from, the amount of love that's on the camera, I think is worth noting. Because how could you not be on that set with those people? You can just tell that you would like to spend some time talking to these people. Like, they're not those type of creatives where I would be shocked if Andy Samberg was a dickhead. Shocked.
Well, it's so would I. The scene that reliably cracks me up so much, where Rod wants everybody to introduce themselves distinctively. And so he says, I'm Rod and I love to party. And nobody can then break themselves of saying, I like to party, and then increasingly can't break themselves of saying, I'm Rod.
No, that's Kevin.
That's just Kevin that says, I'm Rod. That's where, like you say, you just see the camaraderie of these guys is beautiful.
And that reminds me of nothing.
Well, you wanted to talk a little bit about the Bill Hader and Danny McBride, who you thought were underused. This another thing with the original script. These characters were supposed to be in their 80s and like 60s, respectively.
That's hilarious.
The crew was supposed to be.
Crew was all old men, like Blue from Old School.
That's what it seems to me like. Such a clear reference to.
Yeah. To Old School.
Yeah. It's
sure, like because Blue parties with that.
If you're doing a Will Ferrell movie, yeah.
Oh my gosh! If in that scene, was that scene in the original script? Because that feels like very much a them joke, not a South Park joke.
At a certain point, I gave up just trying to track joke for joke.
If a comedy writer writes you a script, and you want to make your own jokes, and you just keep the story but make your own, like the script is a vehicle for the comedy. So it is interesting to me to see where they intersect, at least joke-wise, because it's like, it's not that great of a story for them not to just fucking write their own. Lauren, why don't you just give them the money to write a movie?
Well, they have always had a lot of trouble sort of intersecting with the mainstream. Pop Star is this recent classic example of a cult comedy that, for whatever reason, just could not get noticed.
Not for whatever reason.
Well, then what's the reason? You're so cocky with knowing the reason.
I'm just saying you can't say with no reason. I mean, that movie is not without its problems.
Sure, but it's also indicative of the way that comedy has stopped really appearing in movie theaters in the past 10 years.
Oh.
We've gotten fewer and fewer straight-ahead comedies until...
God, I'm so bad at bird's eye views. Please tell me about that. We've dipped in comedies in general. Is that just a fact? Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar this year? Yeah. Or this past year? That movie felt like a relic of a different era.
Yeah, you're right.
We never see things like that anymore.
It felt like Will Ferrell era.
Yeah. Because now what are comedies?
And it's funny because she's a relic of the Will Ferrell era too. Yeah. So maybe I think that.
At this point, comedy has been glommed into action. Where Free Guy and Spiderman are comedies now.
Free Guy was so good.
Still haven't seen it. I'll take your word for it.
Sleeper. It's like that and what was the new Spielberg action?
Ready Player One?
Yeah, those are the two sleeper, should be bad, but are actually good films. No. But I hear you. You're right. It's more likely that Iron Man's going to be funny than it is to see a refreshing comedy.
They want to give you one movie that's going to do everything, instead of just a good old-fashioned comedy. And that's why Barb and Star felt so refreshing. It's just like, oh, this is just like a cartoon world full of jokes that make me laugh.
And normally you think people would be like, take it to TV? Take it to Netflix?
At this point, yeah, probably. Why hasn't Tim Robinson and Sam Richardson?
Well, because it's a different format, right? Because if you look at Tim Robbins, it's like giving Tim and Eric a movie. It's how are you going to?
They did, and it didn't go well.
Exactly. How are you going to keep that up for 2 hours with any sort of narrative? That's not the format they work in. So, but Andy Samberg, maybe there you go. Maybe that's not their strongest format, like you're saying. They struggled with breaking through. Pop Star was maybe a better story than Hot Rod.
Pop Star, I mean, I have to imagine
parody.
They dreamed that up a little bit more themselves, and it's a parody, but it's also a movie with a ton of heart. It's about It's them playing themselves a little bit. The Lonely Island are playing the Style Boys, and they go their separate ways and have to come back together. It's that beautiful kind of rise and fall. And that's, that is something that it shares with Hot Rod, is that in both cases they're taking, like, it's the inspirational sports movie or it's the band documentary, and they're giving you what is in some ways a satisfying version of it while also subverting it and messing around with it. I was thinking, rewatching Hot Rod yesterday, when he jumps the 15 buses at the end, it genuinely feels like anything could happen.
Yeah.
Because by then, like, he has never landed a stunt in the entire movie.
Yeah.
In real life, he would die. In a movie, he would succeed.
He would succeed, but it doesn't feel far off that they might just kill him as a joke.
Yeah, exactly. By now, the movie has built up to the point that anything feels possible.
You only
That's
have
very
15
exciting.
minutes left. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. May I embarrassingly say that this is the film that I most know Ian McShane from?
I mean, what else? That's what I mean. Deadwood.
I remember when they were talking about like a Game of Thrones reboot, and everyone was so excited about Ian McShane coming on board, or maybe he was in the end of Game of Thrones or something. And I was like, I haven't watched Game of Thrones. And I looked through and I was like, I guess I know him from Hot Rod, but then rewatching the film, bravo Ian McShane and Hot Rod, I would say. I mean, that is a very tough role to totally give 110% the way he did, and that was just I clap at that. He has that look where it's like you don't expect a guy who looks like that to be very funny, and he is very, very, very funny in this. And the physical comedy, as much as like I could point to Wet Hot and like jumping over the haystacks, or the slow-mo scenes, or especially the dance scene in the wooded glen, which I love that Andy calls it in the movie. He refers to it as I like just went rage danced in a wooded glen.
And that is theirs. That is an example of Pam Brady wrote a whole scene. The scene is exactly the same. Rod finds out that his stepfather is dying. He screams, "I need to go to my quiet place."
Quiet place.
And then in the script, he goes and has this whole other scene, and then they instead said, no, we're going to do it's kind of doing the footloose angry dance thing.
Exactly. And there you go with the 80s nostalgia and the costume. And Wet Hot doesn't Wet Hot even take place? It's a period. It's technically when the writers went to camp. It's not when we went to camp. It's when they went to camp as 40-year-old men writing this in 2004 or whatever it was. But I think, what it was, I just saw it in Wet Hot first. I saw the spoof of the 80s montage in Wet Hot. And it made me laugh very much so. And then later I saw Hot Rod and it made me laugh less so. But if I had seen Hot Rod earlier than Wet Hot, who knows, So I need to just walk it back for any of our listeners who are like, dude, let go. Like Wet Hot and Hot Rod have their own thing, and Hot Rod and Napoleon have their own thing. I think what I would say to that is my brain was small. And I liked certain movies so much that seeing other movies that reminded me of those movies made me more want to hate that movie, because I was still figuring out how art related to my own identity at the time.
Well, so that's part of what's fun about doing this.
Was a pass. Yeah, Hot Rod in general was a pass at the time. I was like, dude, have you seen Wet Hot? This is fucking Napoleon. I would have probably been even more strong about that having rewatched it. Laugh out loud, adorable comedy of now thinking these are young men, not men that were way older than me. Now these are young kids making this movie that has a lot of heart and has maybe the craziest supporting cast when you look back at comedy giants these days. To have Danny McBride and Bill Hader as your supporting crew members is insane to think about now. But when I said they were underused, I'll walk that back as well. I like to say loud hot takes, but I'll walk it back as well because, I think Danny McBride's underused in Tropic Thunder, even though that's a classic movie, very funny movie. Tom Cruise, hilarious. There were Ben Stiller, hilarious. Robert Downey Jr., out of control funny. There were so many great new voices of comedy, but Danny McBride blowing shit up, whatever. So I think he had not stepped into his Eastbound and Down role,
totally.
Or
it's a couple
showing
years
you
before.
what he could do. Yeah, and Hader as well. Like Hader had to grow into kind of the outstanding, incredible voice that he is now. Curious. It's funny though. Hader. Would you think Hader was writing on South Park yet? I know there's the SNL connection with Sandberg, but I wonder if Hader had gotten involved with Trey and Matt and knew this writer as well. If there's a bridge
I want to
there.
say that's later. I want to say Hader's not over at South Park for a few more years, but
that makes sense.
Not sure. Yeah.
Is that his hair in the movie? Did Hader grow out like a Slayer, like
have
long
no idea.
hairdo?
I suspect it's not
What
his
a
hair.
look.
That would be great.
It's the same hair color, I guess. It looks really convincing, and it's oh my gosh, that scene where he gets shot in the eye by the metal hunk. My sound bar on my TV has like a compression setting to it. So it peaked way past the compression and blew out my sound. And then it just like the sound system just like ducked and disappeared and had to like gently bring itself back up because it was like into his eye.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was so gnarly. Oh my God. In theaters, I could imagine people howling because you forget that in theaters, the sound system is pumped like 60 decibels in your fucking ears. It's worrying how loud theaters are, in my opinion. Go to Inception, bring a pair of earplugs. A Chris Nolan movie, those things are loud. It's like Kubrick with that, what's the scene in 2001 where he's seeing all the colors? And it's like loud.
The Beyond the Infinite, is that it?
Like, yeah, exactly. And it breaks all the speakers in the theater because it's like mixed way louder than any speakers can handle. Ugh. Which I didn't know. I saw the cut. I not grew up, but in high school and college, I watched Space Odyssey on the DVD. And they duck the mix for that part. It's actually quite pleasant. It's this really beautiful, meditative journey. But then I saw it in theaters when Chris Nolan decided that film was the most important thing in the entire world and was touring around showing people a film print of his favorite movie, Space Odyssey. And I went with my dad.
Oh, right. Yeah. I
remember that?
Now.
Yeah. And who was there? Some star was there. Who's the guy from Star Trek who looks like a puppet?
The guy from Star Trek who looks like a puppet.
The main guy from Star Trek.
William Shatner?
Chris Pine.
He
looks like a Team America puppet to me.
He does, yes.
So we saw him at that screening. But anyway, I was sick at the time, and I remember smoking a joint with my dad, and we went in and we saw Space Odyssey. And I remember at that point, I was still stoned, and that scene happened, and it was blaringly loud. Like I'm talking like I almost had a panic attack.
I'm
thought
sure
something
you
was
did.
wrong
That
with the
sounds
speakers
horrible.
in the theater. And then I read about it, and it turns out that was actually how it was intended. It's not supposed to be meditative. It's not supposed to be the DVD mix. It's supposed to scare the shit out of you. It's not supposed to be psychedelic in a nice, lovely sense. It's supposed to be psychedelic in a terrifying. So that kind of redefined that part for me. But I think I'll stick to the DVD mix. Just to close out on that.
That's the part in the 60s when people would rush the screen screaming, "I see God."
Oh, did that happen?
Yeah, there's some story about that. Like a guy had taken a bunch of acid.
Please find that and send that to me. That's cool. That's cool. I like that. Should we talk music soon? What else do you have to say about Hot Rod?
I feel like I should give, I have my little closing argument. I feel like I need to bang the gavel and say why this is going in. So I think there's a really interesting tension in here. I think Lorne Michaels was right. He took an example of one decade's comedy and he gave it to the next, what he thought would be the next decade's comedy, or guys who did prove to be very influential in this, bringing a digital voice and a do-it-yourself camcorder aesthetic and playing with the weird glitchiness that you get when you're trying to make a movie on a camcorder. And what is the cool beans scene in Hot Rod, if not a celebration of how weird you can make stuff look with your friends when you're just messing around?
So sorry. That is the Tim and Eric moment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That is the moment where I thought most of Tim and Eric, besides the musical number. And you're saying that's same time, contemporaries.
Hot Rod is the same year.
Something is in the air.
Yeah.
Glitchiness.
That awesome show comes out. Yeah.
Digital editing and making fun of those artifacts and making fun of how weird digital editing is.
Exactly. I love
which
that.
Now TikTok is, like that's that digital humor was contemporary. They were to each other. It was something was in there.
Yeah. They're jamming that into the Paramount Studio comedy, and it's a weird fit. But I think it represents this cool cross section and this cool intersection and crossroads moment.
Love that.
So I think that's why I'm banging the gavel.
Did it do well?
No. Oh God, no. No. This was this is a cult comedy. There's a reason they didn't get to make another one for 10 years.
Oh.
Let's check the box office data.
Best thing they've ever done?
Best thing they've ever done. I think Lazy Sunday is just like this
best long form thing they've ever done. I
prefer this to Popstar personally. I think that's maybe a mildly hot take, but this movie's very special.
Finished MacGruber last night.
MacGruber's not a Lonely Island movie though.
I think of it as a Lonely Island movie because that sketch was created and that humor was created on SNL because of Lonely Island being a part of SNL. And adding Will Forte, adding Kristen Wiig, but the writing on that is
Andy even in that movie though?
No, he was in some sketches on SNL for it. I think he plays like a younger. I can see him in the flannel and the vest next to Will Forte. I just don't think. I mean, if the case that if another thing that you're arguing, which I think we're both arguing, is that the heart of this film is undeniable and just so lovely and that comes from this middle school connection, then you've got to loop MacGruber into that because that person Jorma is the person he is because of Andy. Andy is the person he is because of Jorma. They have this humor where you're like, oh, you guys talk the same, like me and Eric and me and you, or whatever it is. So I think of MacGruber, you can link into that universe.
Well, that is a very sweet concept. And then, yes, I am going to say I like Hot Rod a lot more than MacGruber.
Wrong.
This movie lost quite a lot of money. At least on initial release, as reported, the budget was $25 million and it made $14 million.
He's still a cast member at this point
on SNL. I should think so.
I should think so as well. 2007. He is. They
got lots more years of
this is like
digital
Staten
shorts
Island. To come. Yeah, for Pete.
Sure.
Judd Apatow's. Yeah.
You want to ding it? Can we put it in the time capsule?
Yeah. Oh shit. What was that? Hold on. Yeah, of course. Of course we can ding it. I haven't rearranged my studio. The time capsule's right here. All right, cool. It's in there.
Cool.
It's in there.
It fell on top of the other stuff, and that's why there was all that noise. Do you want to do a pop quiz? This one's very simple.
Yeah, of course. When do I not want to do a pop quiz? You could call me anytime and ask me if I want to do a pop quiz.
Okay, name the 5 people who are finalists for Time Magazine Person of the Year in 2007. Go.
Can you give me categories? Like 2 from arts and entertainment, one in business, one in sports.
So that was round 1, was can you just guess the 5? You can't, because I'll give you hints for round 2.
No.
I'm fucking with you. Of course you can.
2007.
Okay, go.
Steve Jobs?
No,
did he make something that year?
He's not on the list.
I thought maybe like the iPod Mini came out that year or something.
Okay, so we've got 2 foreign leaders, an author, a former U.S. leader, and an army general. 2 of these I do not think you are going to get at all.
These are so not culture to me, what I think of as culture.
So 2 of these you're not going to get. 3 you could get.
Which ones? Give me the categories for those.
Okay, so 2. So we'll just knock 2 of them out right now. Our General Petraeus.
Oh, Petraeus!
And Hu Jintao, who was
Tao.
the president of the Chinese Communist Party at the time.
Yeah, you don't have to tell General me. Petraeus, this is for the listeners. I know this.
Yes, of course. And General Petraeus had been credited with giving straight facts about the war in Iraq without sugarcoating it.
No, so he's the Star Wars guy that they had to reanimate with CGI.
That's right.
General Petraeus.
So, and then the other 3, we've got a foreign leader, a former U.S. leader, and an author.
Kim Jong-un?
No, but you're in the ballpark. Who is another?
Saddam?
No,
he's
still
dead.
In the ballpark.
No, he's still in the underground ballpark.
Somebody who is like an enemy of America. Putin was Yeah. Putin was on the list.
I like that Putin is an enemy of America for any sane individual.
Yep. Right. Oh, I forgot.
Portrayed as kind of like a weird friend of America.
Yeah. Enemy of America, asterisk.
Yeah.
So then there is a children's book author who was beloved at that time and is not now.
J.K. Rowling.
Correct. And then a former vice president who had recently gotten back in the mix. Al Gore.
Inconvenient Truth.
So
is that 2007 Inconvenient Truth?
if it was not 2007, it would have been 06.
He invented the internet and then invented global warming. This dude's really he's a good inventor.
He shouldn't have invented global warming. It's a
no,
bad
he did.
thing.
He killed all those damn penguins. Yeah. No, but he invented. I mean, Inconvenient Truth was when people were like, "You heard about this global warming stuff?"
Yeah, well, that was.
I mean, at least in my consciousness,
reinvented himself.
Yeah,
so.
Sure.
I can tell you. Do you want to guess who of those three won Times Person of the Year? Al Gore, J.K. Rowling, or Putin? I'll say Petraeus and the leader of the Chinese Communist Party didn't win.
2007. Would that have been Deathly Hallows Part 2? Like, because I could imagine them giving to Rowling if she had completed the series and put out her last book.
She had just
year.
completed the series. That's why she's on the list.
I think that's her.
Vladimir Putin was the Time Person of the Year in 2007.
Same difference.
Yep. And the quote was, "At significant cost to the principles and ideas that free nations prize, he has performed an extraordinary feat of leadership."
True. And we need to recognize it in the press.
Yes.
Like, because look, he's a bad guy, but like, it's time for us to stop beating around the bush and give him his due and put him on the cover of all of our magazines. Because yes, he's a bad guy, but he's certainly our Person of the Year. He's not the hero we wanted, but he's the hero we deserve.
Well, that's basically what they say in the thing. Is they're like, this is not an endorsement. These are just the straight
Spiderman.
Facts. He is with great power comes great responsibility, and that's why Vladimir Putin is the most important person on Earth.
This season of What a Year is brought to you by Mubi, which is, I said it last time, I'm going to say it again, they are my absolute favorite streaming service, and I would love to tell you why. And listen, I know that right now you are maybe tempted to hit that little skip ahead button. We all do it during podcast ads. But please actually listen to this one, because I get to tell you about some genuinely cool stuff. Not just how Mubi works, but this really amazing project that they are doing this summer. So first off, I hope, for your sake, that you already know what Mubi is, but if not, I can tell you that they are a curated streaming service that shows exceptional films from around the globe. Every day they premiere a new film, and it might be from an iconic director or an emerging auteur, and honestly, it's one of my favorite parts of the day, getting that little email from Mubi that tells you what they have added that day, and it always sounds so exciting, and it's not some algorithm that's serving you up something. Each one of their movies is hand-selected, so, as they like to say, it's like your own personal film festival streaming anytime, anywhere. So that's Mubi, but now I get to tell you what they are working on this summer. They are currently on the second season of their acclaimed audio documentary series, Mubi Podcast, and this season they are focusing on movie theaters because, again, as they like to say, in a time when too many cinemas are shutting down, it is time to lift them up, and I hope that we can all agree about that. So every episode this season tells some surprising story of an individual movie theater that had a huge impact on film history or just history in general. And honestly, I am kind of obsessed with this podcast. This is me off script. I am done with the talking points that they gave me. This show is so good. It is so well produced. There's music and film clips and beautiful narration from Rico Galliano and interviews with experts. I just finished the second episode, and I'm dead serious. This might be one of my favorite podcast episodes that I have ever heard. It's the story of the Elgin Theater in New York and the owner, Ben Barinholtz, who brought El Topo to America. This is the guy that we have to thank for us getting to see El Topo. And it's the story of how the phenomenon of midnight movies were born, but I am obsessed with El Topo, which, if you don't know, is basically like a spaghetti western that is soaked in LSD and then dried off with the Bible. And I basically know everything there is to know about how this movie was made and released, but even then, this is such a fun listen. You get the whole story, but you also hear from the great Amy Nicholson and Jay Hoberman, and best of all, they actually got an interview with the director of El Topo, Alejandro Jodorowsky. And if you know one thing about Alejandro Jodorowsky, you know that he is so wild to listen to. He's like this jolly lunatic, and any new material with him is so much fun. So seriously, you've got to listen to this episode. You've got to listen to the whole show. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. And this is one of the coolest things that I've gotten to discover this year, and I would be saying that even if they weren't sponsoring this show. But since they are sponsoring this show, now I get to say that listeners to What a Year can try Mubi for 30 days absolutely free by going to mubi.com/whatayear. That's mubi.com/whatayear. You can get a whole month of great cinema for free, and honestly, what could be better than that? I cannot wait to tell you more next time, but in the meantime, back to the show.
So we've reached the beautiful part in my outline where it just says Spider-Man of the Rings, and then there's nothing. So now I'm just going to sit back.
Now you're going to start chugging.
I'm going to sit back with this beer and say, let's talk about Spider-Man of the Rings, and I'm going to try not to cry.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? Spider-Man of the Rings by Dan Deacon. It is such an amazing piece of art that I am willing to throw it in the time capsule to begin with, before we even talk about it, because there's no way you're blocking this, because I know you love Dan Deacon as well. Nobody in their right mind could ever stop this from creeping its way, from climbing its way, crawling its way slowly through the forest,
web slinging
the
its
deserts into this time capsule, this hole in the ground that we've created in Western Massachusetts, I'd say.
Sure. Okay, so we're done. It's over.
Okay, so geez. Okay, so 2007. I'm making music currently in Reason, in this electronic program. I'm getting used to the idea of electronic music as something that is exciting, as something that is not. Electronic music for me growing up was like American pop music, like boy bands had a lot of synth and electronic drums, and then 80s music, which growing up, eventually I came to love. I like some 80s music now, but when I was a kid, I thought it sounded like yuck. So I think of electronic, I always thought of electronic music as lifeless, soulless, stupid. Why don't you play a freaking guitar? That thing sounds bad. Why don't you play a real piano? I hated electronic music. Just was down in high school, was super into classic rock. I know you were as well, into rock musicians, into a person playing an instrument with strings. And 2007, 2006 was the first time where electronic music had entered my life in a very, very exciting way. And it was because artists were... It was not meant to use electronic music to sound polished, to sound better than the real thing. It was using electronic music to make a computer sound wrong, or make a piano sound digital, or make a guitar sound MIDI, or make MIDI sound like a guitar. It was this blurring of the lines that allowed me to fall in love with a new way of recording, a new way of appreciating sound. And Dan Deacon was an instrumental part of that. I mean, the hearing him sounded like nothing else. And I think that that's what electronic music does too, because if you're a folk artist and you want to play an acoustic guitar and express yourself by singing with your acoustic guitar, there's going to be naturally this implied history and this implied place for you to sit in. And with electronic music, there suddenly is more room to, and we discussed it with Panda Bear too, there becomes this studio revolution to not use electronic music to aid your recording process, to just make it easier, because technology by definition is things easier and faster for us, right? But this was almost saying, let's take the technology and make it sound wrong. Let's make it sound human. Let's make it, and...
Well, can I interrupt and say,
please.
I watched a video of Dan Deacon from a few years after this album, working in the studio, and he used a term that I loved, which is, I'm looking for the human element that's not human. Mm. And one of the things that they do, his sound, I want to hear you describe his sound because it is so unique and intricate. But one thing that I don't think he's doing on this album, but does on later albums, is he's programming player pianos.
Sure. Brahms.
To play at, exactly. This is, Brahms is the album he's recording.
Got it.
In the video I've seen. And he's got these player pianos that are wired to go 120 beats a minute. and are just, are going faster than any human being could ever play. And so that's the cool collision of the human and the not human. Yeah. But that's not this album. But I think the album has the inhuman humanity.
100%. If not more so challenging you as a listener to hear that, because Brahms, at least you're dealing with an organic instrument and you're hearing something unhuman, right? But on Spider-Man and the Rings, you're first and foremost hearing something unhuman, starting to sound human.
You're hearing what sounds like Nintendo cartridges at times.
I've never found more joy and love in the Uncanny Valley than I have with Spider-Man and the Rings, because it's one of those things where it's just none of the electronic machine elements do anything to detract the personality of the artist in such a pure way. I mean, he is in your brain when you are listening to this record. You are hearing the personality and the being of Dan Deacon while you're listening to this record, and he is not shy and not afraid to tell you that he wants to share every single fucking unicorn and rainbow that he feels, and yet there is humor, there is darkness, there is this past of him for a school project cursing and imitating a Long Island guy. I mean, this guy, he's very funny, he's very dark.
He's worked with Adult Swim a bunch, which seems
exactly
very
there's this weird humor, this dark humor to it. But above the dark humor is unabashed joy. It is you can't hate me because I'm too happy to even acknowledge you don't like me. And you can see that in his live videos. You can see him being like, gosh, struggling through the wires upon connections, but all he cares about is that people are smiling, and that's his fight. I mean, that's his fight, is to bring joy to the world in the way that he can express it. And it comes through to me. It comes through to you. I know that, and it's one of those records that I would say 5 out of 10 times you'll play it for somebody and they'll be like, this is fucking weird. Like, this is really weird. I don't like it. It's kind of making me anxious. Can you please turn it off? But 2007 and today still felt those feelings of pure cinematic joy, pure that happy sad, that and like there's always, I would argue this is more of a sad happy than a happy sad, or no, I would argue this is a happy sad, because there are sad happies, but I think this is first and foremost that joy, but then there's that heart tugging.
What's the sad that you see?
I think maybe it's more musical, in the progressions, because I'm a lyric second person, and you could read me all the poetry. I'm sure it'd make me crack up. It'd make me crack up. I'm sure. What a poet! Oh my goodness! It kind of reminds me of like Shell, or like, I don't know, like this weird like kid author or something. But anyway, I think the sadness is in the progressional material musically, like the chords that he chooses, even if it's like a song about snakes or a song about unicorns or whatever the hell Dan wants to talk about. There are these chord changes that feel like I'm listening to Arcade Fire's Funeral, or like it's cinematic and it's pulling and my heartstrings are involved.
Well, here's one thing: this is an album about how it's awesome to party. And it's an album about how it's awesome to party because the world is going to end in 5 years. Do you know this?
No, nothing about this.
I read an interview with Deacon where he is looking back on the album, and he uses the word escapism, which I really love. He says, I started to see the value in escapism and creating these worlds. And that's one thing you talked about a bunch with Panda Bear and Person Pitch, was this idea of creating worlds to escape into. So I thought it was cool that
this world is so much more like less dust. This is more like neon colors and like Guardians of the Galaxy lights and like spaceships and I said rainbows and some like Lisa Frank. Like the sky looks like Lisa Frank, but you're like on another planet with like weird monsters and stuff.
Well, I gotta look up the lyrics to Wham City for that reason.
Oh, that could be the highlight of the record.
Yeah, the 12-minute track that's named after his collective.
Oh yeah, that's right. The Collective, which I know nothing about the other guys in the Collective or other people in the Collective.
So it's this escapist record that takes place in these beautiful fantasy lands. Wham City. There's a mountain of snow up past the Big Glen.
Where does the apocalypse come from?
I'm going to tell you. So I won't just read the entire lyrics of this 12-minute track. But so he's creating this
hand. There is something enclosed. There is a fountain. Out of the fountain flows gold. Across a huge hand. There's like something that was full of boots.
The hand is held by a bear who has a sick band of ghosts and cats and pigs and bats with brooms and bats and wigs and rats and play big dogs like queens and kings, and everyone plays strings and sings.
Sharp swords, sing swords. I say. Oh my God, live, that was crazy. Can't tell you how much a Dan Deacon show. That's when you're going to cry, is when you see him live.
You've seen him live?
Oh yeah.
Well, tell me about that, and then I'll tell you about the apocalypse.
No. You tell me about Tell me about the apocalypse, and I'll tell you about
live. Him live. Okay, so he subscribes to the 2012. He subscribed to the 2012 is going to be the end of the world thing,
which was the Mayan calendar.
Yep, and we were 5 years off in 2007. He completely believed in that and says,
I got nervous about it.
I lived this absurdist nihilist lifestyle.
No, I can't believe that.
You can't believe it. Well, listen to.
I can't believe that. I'd have to be institutionalized if I thought the world was going to end. Truly thought that. Oh well,
he seems like he was a man who was in a very unusual place when this came out. He didn't have an ID. He didn't have a phone.
Huh.
He was just in, it sounds like, a real sort of void. And just living this in the moment lifestyle. I'm going to read you a little bit of
which, by the way,
here.
Contrasts to what I hear about him today. And I
absolutely, yeah. Apparently this was a huge hinge point in his life.
Oh, okay. That's fascinating because he seems very, very stable, very, very community-based, very gripped and giving today from what I hear. And to not have a phone or an ID or think the world's ending, I don't think you can be as giving as this man is these days and with that kind of mentality. So it's interesting. But then again, this 15 years ago, we keep forgetting he was a kid, or like our age or a little younger maybe at the time. So, yeah. So tell me more about that.
You have Wham City, which is the 12-minute track cool. That is all this, like, there's a mountain of gold and there's pigs and cats and blah, 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 blah. This sort of goofy, like you say, Lisa Frank Adult Swim landscape. And
like kind of medieval Dungeons and Dragons vibe too, from what I could pick up.
Yeah. Minutes and minutes later, there's an electronic sort of computery voice comes in and starts to say some of the darkest things.
Is that the vocoder part?
Yeah, exactly.
Where you can't really hear it because it's like harmonized and it's like kind of like in chords.
Yeah. Exactly. You have to look it up.
Okay.
But what he's saying is, I hope in my heart that we, on a whole, will die and the earth will be left alone. Yeah. Wait, what is no? That all knowledge of us has decayed, our burden raised, the world set free, the earth returns to the land and sea, our buildings burned and highways gone. I love my friends and everyone, but we've had our chance. Let's move aside. Let time wash us out with the tide.
So I don't think that's dark unless you had told me that he believed it. Right? Because if you're talking heads and you're writing nothing but flowers and you're saying, why don't we all fuck off from this planet because it's time for the trees to regrow? Sure. Philosophy. Great.
Yeah.
But if you believe, if you are, thinking the world's coming to an end, then those lyrics become extremely dark, extremely upsettingly dark.
And that's what I hear in it.
So but I want him to be kidding about that. I want him to be creating a persona to tell Pitchfork that he thought the world was going to end. And I don't want to believe that he thought that because that's so dark. That's so sad.
Telling the Baltimore Sun in this case.
And the music is so joy. Yeah. Oh, well, then that makes me believe it more because he loves fucking Baltimore. Oh my God. And that's what I was going to say is he is currently today producing records, not putting his name on it, calling people up, introducing Baltimore artists to labels, just giving. And all I hear from people who know about Baltimore is patron saint of patron saints of Baltimore is Dan fucking Deacon in the music scene. So I can't give him enough credit because saw him live when I was a kid and it changed live performance for me. As
Tell me how.
I told you I was over live music.
Yes.
On the fence.
So what did it do? Why am I going to cry?
To do with COVID era live music too.
Yeah.
So electronic music was challenging for me at the time as well, because I was falling in love with records that sounded otherworldly, escapist, were creating sonic textures in my head I'd never heard before from organic instruments. And I was seeing it live, and it was a dude with a guitar, a backing track, and a singer. It sounded very good, and it wasn't compelling. It wasn't a compelling live experience. So this whole electronic music thing, be it, because it opened the doors in the 2000s for indie music to use electronic textures, but then the live aspect of that became an issue for me as an audience member. Seeing someone with a backing track was fucking lame, and it still is. And I will go on record saying that it's fucking lame.
You just did.
And if you have a tape loop, fine. But if you have like big drums that you want to pump through the PA, just to have smaller drums and have someone play it, because as an audience member, it's way more fun to watch someone do it than just to hear it done behind closed doors. And that's why you're going to a live show. If not, I just put your record on. So, I just think that was challenging for me. And Dan Deacon is using backing track elements. I mean, he is touring with a bunch of fucking shit that doesn't work half the time in a bunch of pedal cases. He doesn't have a lot of money. He's part of this Pitchfork generation where all of a sudden you get a bunch of indie cred and reviews, and you're touring the country and you're out there every single day playing for these crowds, but they're still half attentive crowds. There's still funny. Crowds you need to command.
Can I say, you said the Pitchfork generation. He counts himself in the MySpace generation in that Baltimore Sun piece. He says, this is MySpace. This is the MySpace moment. So I don't know if that resonates for you.
My story.
What?
Not framed within my story.
Oh, okay. I apologize.
Because MySpace music doesn't exist with my story. That's like, I don't think I've ever, Peppers, maybe in high school, the bands that were playing in my town were on MySpace in high school. Sure. In college, it was Pitchfork. It was Pitchfork was the signpost for American indie music culture for me at the time. And that's probably where Dan Deacon might have been like this weird basement show that Pitchfork was like, dude, check this out. This basement with this weird dude. And he's telling all the kids in the crowd he's not playing on a stage, first and foremost. He's dividing the dividing line between audience and performer. He wants to be part of you. He doesn't want to be up on a pedestal. He wants to be in there with you because he is he's your friend. He's someone who wants to cry with you more than he wants to play you a song. And he's having people sprint around his setup, playing his music out of these shitty PA speakers and his gear that gets unplugged with some kid who trips over the wire and falls. And before Dan Deacon goes and plugs into the left speaker of his live setup, half of his speakers are not working. He goes and picks the kid up. And like that is, to me, what changed the game in a live aspect. He rejects you watching from the bar. He rejects you having a drink in your hand while you're watching a band. He wants you to come hug him. He wants you to come hug the person next to you. He wants you to experience the joy that he has so hard tried to not hide from the world. And that's why it surprised me with the whole apocalyptic thing, because it seems like my Dan Deacon thesis is like, don't you dare try to act cool. Don't you dare try to stop this fucking rainbow going out from my heart into your ears. And if you're too cool for it, decide that on your own time and don't come to my fucking show. But if you do, let's all have the best time we've ever had together. And to give that kind of giving energy as part of the Pitchfork generation, which I know a lot of people from that generation who went on tour every day because that's how people were making money and they drove themselves fucking crazy. And who's to say he didn't? life on the road is a grueling life. And for him, for every video that I watch of him, for him to give as much as he does as one person alone in his van, coming to every single show to bring you an audience from some town of 30 to 50 kids, and to sweat his fucking ass off and scream and get his shit unplugged and have a panic attack because half of his things got unplugged because he's trying to make people do a hopscotch move in the crowd or something in coordinated fashion, like, and oral speak in like this weird meditative mantra about Lethal Weapon 2 before he starts, and nobody's even laughing at the jokes. But he doesn't care. It's anti-cool. It's anti-cool. Yeah. And maybe Hot Rod is too, less so than Dan. Dan is a hard-boiled egg without the shell, but like somehow playing for thousands of kids, you know, like insane. So that's my thing about him live. And yeah, I've said enough about the record. So yeah, over to you. That was my like kind of emotional, and I've had the pleasure of being a kid enough to have the youthful energy to give him back what he was giving to me, because I doubt at 33 I'd do it now if I'd just been introduced. Maybe, who's to say? But I was running around. I was jumping on people. I was, you know, he would. You know, more important than the next chorus was telling the wave of people sprinting around his booth to switch. And
so he was doing that.
Like, yeah, okay. Like bar mitzvah. Yeah. Everybody run. Everybody go back, because he was pitchfork big, but he would go play a show, and Vampire Weekend would play on the same festival bill. But the kids didn't really know who Dan Deacon was, and so he would take a command of that audience. He said, "I don't care if you don't know who I am. This is who I am." The music does not speak for itself necessarily. It does. It speaks to who I am, but here's me too, and I'm not afraid to be like, everybody act like children. And that's a huge thing too. Music in general, I think, is our sense of play. Movies is our sense of play too. Dan Deacon encapsulates that for me. To not ever take yourself too seriously. To not ever say, you know, for him to be like, I'm going to be remembered in history for this important thing I sang about boots and cats and shrimps and rats. Yeah. He doesn't have that opinion about art. He doesn't. It's more about the feeling than it is about leaving your mark. It's more about the feeling than it is about anything, about money, about, it's just this thing that he had to say. And thank God he said it. Made you cry, made me cry. Love this record. Spiderman and the Rings, already in the time capsule. I'm out. You talk now. Bye.
Okay. I'll see you later. And I'm just going to talk to nobody.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a playful record that invites you to engage with it playfully. And that I think is a huge thing. It's fun to hear that you were in that kind of group dance thing, because I watched this video 9 times in the last 2 days of him performing at NPR. Did you watch that I sent you?
No, I don't think so. But for our listeners' sake, just this is something we haven't done yet on the podcast, but it's really beautiful to have you fall in love with a new artist too, like something that I liked 15 years ago and don't listen to today. You're having your first like true connection with this art, and that's so important to me and so fucking cool. Like that's so cool. You're a huge Dan Deacon fan and watched an NPR video 9 times or whatever. That's really cool to me, because I remember, you know, back in the day or whatever, you know, maybe in 2007, Russell and I putting it on. You've been in cars where Dan Deacon has played, and I will truly argue this till the end of my time here, that taste is has nothing to do with any judgment of intelligence, any judgment. It's just where you are.
Yeah, it did nothing for me then.
And now all of a sudden here you are. Right? It's cool.
Well, this is like a top 10 album for me at this point. All of a sudden, like it has to be, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But the NPR video that was so impactful for me is he's doing this Tiny Desk concert, which is like an NPR thing. They've created a little space.
I think I did watch it. I think that's what I was referring to with Lethal Weapon 2 or something.
Oh no, he's talking about He's talking about Bad Boys in that one, but yeah. And you rarely see the reverse in that video. You rarely see the people watching.
Sure.
And the people watching are apparently NPR staffers. And he does this this group dance thing where first he just has them create a dance circle and they're one at a time dancing. And then he builds it into this other thing where he designates two people, splits the room in half, designates two people, and they have to each pick a dance move and perform it. And everybody has to mimic along with what the person is doing. And in a time of COVID, not to be hacky, but watching an office full of people mashed together with one person having an impulse in their mind that then is mimicked by everybody else, I found so emotionally overwhelming. This fact that this guy just comes into this workspace and says, I'm going to transform this into something where one person is going to be echoed by dozens of people. And it's this feeling of just watching movement that's coordinated, but also chaotic.
Yeah.
I found that so beautiful somehow.
No, I think that is beautiful. And I think that emotionally registers for me to hear you talk about it too. Because I mean, I think that's incredible. That energy that he's giving is not, hey, I'm the leader here, I decide what we do. It's like that person that decides. It's that situation where you wouldn't have done it yourself, but you're so glad somebody decided to just be human and like exposed. And once one person does, everyone else can. And then looks back on that experience as like, man, I'm really glad that person was there because it brought me out of what I would have just stood there without that person. But that person did something, and then all of a sudden now I'm crying and laughing and experiencing, and it reminds me of that fucking Sondheim musical I just saw, Company. Yeah. That's what life is, it's connection, and he drives that home with live performance for sure. Beautiful. I haven't talked really about kind of the circumstances of me actually falling in love with this record, though, sort of just to experiment for a minute with trying to talk about it. You haven't talked to me about that?
Not really. A little, but I certainly haven't talked in the last 20 minutes.
Please do.
But I have a psychiatric diagnosis that sometimes means my brain is working a little bit at cross purposes with itself.
Sure.
And there's times when that is incredibly chaotic and you just want someone to come along and wrap you in some kind of bear hug that just shuts everything out.
Sure.
And the first time I put this album on and went for a walk, and the first track is you're just hearing the faster arpeggios than you've ever thought could be humanly possible, and Woody Woodpecker is screaming in your ears. Somehow, I just felt like I had been grabbed by the shoulders, shaken really hard, and hugged. And it's really hard to explain why, because it's so chaotic. It should not be comforting. But somehow, this is just music that makes me feel a kinship and a... It's such silly music. And it makes me feel seen, and it makes me feel recognized and held, and I appreciate that. Dan Deacon, thanks for that.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. That's absolutely
with
beautiful.
Pigs and bats and coots and rats and chats and bats and all that stuff.
Coots. What is a coot again?
Coots and chats.
No, I mean, it is so comforting to me to hear that a piece of music such as the Woody Woodpecker track, the first track, which I think might be called Woody Woodpecker.
It's called Woody Woodpecker. Yes, it is.
It's comforting to me that could be comforting to you, because I think with music, the explanation becomes and art in general, I'd say, I would imagine for painting especially. The idea, painting is the obvious example of I walk up to you at an art museum and you're crying your eyes out looking at a painting of a chair. And
it's a very unlikely scenario, but go ahead.
And I say to you, why are you crying? And you say to me, isn't it obvious? And I said, no, but I like the chair. It's like with Dan Deacon, it's like, I could so imagine hearing that first track and not ever hearing the rest. That first track to me is weeding out the audience.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I to an extent.
I also think it's an interesting thing where it builds up to its most basic track. The last track, except for whatever the hell the last spoken word track is.
Yeah, no comment.
Same. The second to last track is like almost feels like a statement of purpose track where it's just incrementally building out an electronic palette. And you're right, the first one is the most aggressive and the hardest to listen to. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. But also that's why it's comforting to me, is because I've felt calm in harsh sonic soundscapes. I've felt anxious in ambient calm soundscapes. The most, the big example of that is the argument against Muzak or elevator music or grocery store music. That it's ambient music designed for a certain purpose, but has an effect that isn't designed for it. So it makes everyone anxious when it's supposed to be soothing. I've had that experience, and then I've also listened to doom metal that put me to sleep. I used to go to sleep to The Wall by Pink Floyd. It's soothing in aspects, but also a rock record, so I think that's just comforting to me because I know that there's that area of just immediate juxtaposition or misunderstanding with, hey, I listened to Woody Woodpecker by Dan Deacon and I just felt safe and hugged and immediately there as a public opinion. If that was something being said to a group of 10 people who had also listened to Woody Woodpecker by Dan Deacon, I would guarantee you that you would be a little lonely in that room. And that to me is comforting because as someone who just adores the shit out of music, and I know you do too, it's just so nice to know that the personal connection to a piece of music has nothing to do with anything except for you and that music, and not even the intention of the artist. Maybe he designed that track to try to make you fucking go jump off a bridge, but it comforted you. I don't know. It's like intention isn't necessarily, it's a little bit more muddied when it comes to musical textures, I feel like. And that's why I love that phrase, happy, sad, or sad, happy. The juxtaposition of film, of crying, but someone being like, are you okay? And you'd be like, yeah, I'm really good. Like that feeling that's often sought out for me with art. Both my two favorite art genres, which are the two, I think, art genres we're talking about. Right?
What?
Top two favorite art genres?
Film and music, or happy, sad, and sad, happy?
No, film and music. Music and film.
I like them all.
Photography, poetry. If you had to choose two, it'd be these two, I think.
Oh, well, sure. Also theater and books. Those are good too.
No? Books.
Yeah.
I don't know how to read, so
books.
I'm out of that.
I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe here's the challenge. By the end of this miniseries, you're going to learn to read. So I am so excited to welcome to the podcast Branson Reese, who you might know as a comics artist. He recently published the collection Hell Was Full, available everywhere now. He's the creator of Swan Boy, which is both the webcomic and the FX series, and he is the co-creator and host of, I think it's fair to say, the great American podcast, Rude Tales of Magic. Branson, thank you so much for being here. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is smart. Some podcasts they have you on and you don't get to promote till the very end, but you do it like this, and then the guest is I'm in a great mood now that I've heard about myself.
Perfect. Well, and now we're gonna tack right away from you and talk instead about your contribution to the 2007 time capsule. Branson's contributing the webcomic Achewood by Chris Onstad. Let's go with Onstad.
I've always said Onstad.
That sounds better. Chris Onstad.
But I don't know. I mean, I've only read it the same way you have. I actually don't know the answer.
Sure. So Achewood ran from 2001 until increasingly sporadically 2016. It was named the #1 graphic novel of 2007 by Time magazine, which said, quote, "The art is at times crude, but it rises to moments of extreme lyrical beauty, and the writing has enormous emotional range from aching sadness to some of the most brilliant, bizarre comedy happening anywhere in any medium." So that's what we're here to talk about. But first, Branson, can you tell me where were you in 2007? Do you have any like particular associations with the world 15 years ago?
Oh God, yeah. I was on my way to a Tokyo Police Club concert. You know, it just
There
like
you go, yeah.
I had bootcut jeans and the ugliest haircut you've ever fucking seen. I was in college in 2007. I was like in the middle of getting kicked out of college in 2007.
Congrats.
Not one of my favorite years, but and this would have been right around when I was discovering Achewood. I knew it only a little bit from like, if you would read at the time, like in the aughts, like I would read AV Club when it was still sort of like connected to the Onion. Right. And I just remember Achewood screenshots. I don't remember in what context. I just associate them with that. And so when I finally started reading it, I was like, oh, I've seen this before. Like I was familiar with the art for it, but it was very verbose. So I just sort of, my eye passed right over it. But then when I sat down to I think a friend of mine who I trusted was like, no, it's good. And that's like all it took for me. I'm still very impressionable. But it worked in this case. So I started reading it and it was, it just immediately, it was like, oh, this is like New Simpsons or something, like that level of like, I want to immerse myself in this.
So how, if somebody is coming to you and says, what the hell is it? Can you describe Achewood to somebody?
Well, it's going to depend. If it's a stranger, then no, I'd ask them to go away. But like if it was like a friend, I would depend on like what they're into, because it's a very like, it's a big and very like multifaceted I mean, the main way I explain it to people is like, oh, it was a huge influence on me. Like if you already are asking my opinion on stuff, there must be some small buy-in on like, you like what I'm doing a little bit. If you like that, you're going to love this thing that I'm just like scraping off the edge of that. Like this
Sure.
is just, it's there and it exists on its own. So I don't know. I would call it like, it's almost like literary in the way that it's like Mark Twain is like a huge influence on like the prose and like the tone of it. So I tend to go in more of the like, it's just this like beautifully written webcomic that's also like up there with some of the stupidest shit you've ever read in your life. I don't know. It's this very nice mixture.
It is. Well, Time Magazine described it as a grown-up suburban stoned version of the 100 Acre Wood, which I did appreciate.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I was going to ask towards the end, maybe sort of what kind of influence it had on you, but can you talk about that at all since you brought it up? Sort of what you saw in there. Yeah. It's
something very specific, and I've never like verbalized it before, so this might be inelegant, but it's like, it is this like mundane but still expansive world building that it has, where it's like, it is this like, it's suburban. I think it's set in like the Bay Area, I think is like, it's actually specifically set like in a specific part of the country, but it's sort of irrelevant. Like when I was reading it, I was like living in suburban DC area, and it was like, it felt akin to that too, where it's like, well, there's this just sort of sprawl that, you go to most towns in America, and other than like the trees that are like different in different regions, it all looks sort of the same shit for the most part. And so it sort of takes place in that world, but there's this it's almost like where I'm from, we had this thing called Bunnyman Bridge, which was this like, do you know Bunnyman Bridge?
I don't know. I just
know it though, because every town has a thing like this,
Sure.
where it's like, oh, this lunatic escaped from the asylum and he dresses as a bunny and he'll kill you and he lives under a bridge. And so, you and your friends would dare each other to go drive out there. And it's like, that's stupid. And I think it's based either on nothing or probably something that was sad for that guy. It's like not actually scary, but it's this sort of this feeling of like, I am in a boring place, but if I just investigate a little bit, there's all sorts of like weird, it's like you lift up a brick and there's all these bugs under there. Like
Sure.
There's all this weird, like lived in, history to like the area that I'm in, even though it is sort of bland, and it's like, well, it's the same Chili's here as in every other city in the country. And that, I don't know, something about Achewood to me, it seems to really like amp up and deliver on that promise of like, well, if you focus enough on any aspect of like the world that they're in, it gets really interesting.
Yeah, it definitely, it feels like it takes place in the America that's right off the freeway.
Yes,
just as anonymous as possible. Yeah. So something that's really notable about 2007 is it's a year with a few real sort of story arcs for the comic. And you were talking about the sort of more expansive world, and something that really strikes me is it gets more expansive emotionally as well. Mm-hmm. So the 2007 stories are like these characters, Ray and Roast Beef are kind of the protagonists a little bit, increasingly over the course of the series, taking more and more central focus.
They sort of hijack the strip because it starts off, it is very much like 100 Acre Woods, where it's like I think it's just like he and his wife at the time like had stuffed animals, and he was doing comics about these stuffed animals that they have, and very quickly it starts to sort of spiral, and he's just got such an interesting mind that it stops being about that pretty quickly, and it becomes about them just living together. And then these 3 cats show up, 2 of whom are pretty interesting, and 1 of whom is like just sort of a hate sink. Yep. But and the 2 that are interesting just completely immediately hijack the comic strip, and it becomes significantly better as soon as it becomes about these 2 guys.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like that doesn't happen with any, it's not like Calvin and Hobbes, or it's like, whoa, his buddy shows up, and then it just is about them from then on.
The only thing I could think of to compare it to was Bloom County, which starts out with sort of the more white bread kids, and then they increasingly fade away in favor of Opus and Bill the Cat and Steve Dallas, right?
Yeah. Or it's like what Peanuts if Peanuts gave in to Snoopy.
Sure.
If Snoopy's dark presence was able to corrupt all of Peanuts.
With all of the Snoopy offshoots, Joe Cool and...
Yeah, if those became actually big characters with storylines, and
his Wild West cousin or whatever, yeah.
Oh yeah, Spike.
Spike, yes, thank you.
Of course, I got you. Don't worry.
I appreciate it. So I'm going to tack right away from even the question I was starting on to, because it does start with who I think of as the legacy characters, who are, is it Cornelius and Theodore?
Yes, you got Cornelius, Theodore, you've got Lyle, you've got Philippe.
And Todd, very quickly.
Oh yeah, you got Todd. I forget. Yeah, Todd is almost like a precursor to it's like a dry run for Ray later on.
Yes, yeah, the Chaos Agent.
He's because it starts with Lyle is the tiger,
yeah,
and he's just sort of into Motorhead and a heavy drinker, and I think he's Scottish, but I can never tell what his accent is from the writing. So it starts Lyle, and then Lyle gets amped up with this squirrel. Todd, who shows up, who's the famous, I don't know if anyone knows Achewood, the sucking dick bought this van bumper sticker,
yeah.
That's Todd's energy, or the strip where he's doing cocaine and Ray is don't you do cocaine at me, and he's pointing at him while he does it. I mean, great character, wonderful character. Way later when he goes to the oh god, what is it? He goes to North Korea, and it's a computer game text adventure.
I don't think I read as much as I could of this strip, which, like you, I had only kind of sort of passed through me from being on the internet constantly. I read as much as I could in the past week and sort of have Achewood. I got Achewood pilled, but I didn't make it to this storyline. Todd
shows. I mean, Todd is he dies a few times and he comes back. Todd. Yes, Todd's a pretty realistic portrayal of that. I've had friends like that in my friend group where it's oh, I love this guy. I'm not going to say his name. He might listen, but I love this guy. The last time I had a conversation with him, he yelled at me so loud he broke a blood vessel in his eye, and then he wandered into the ocean. So he might be dead now. Yeah, Todd's like that, and then Ray shows up, and Ray is right away, Ray has all this dimensionality to him. He seems very confident, and Theodore is intimidated by him, but also Ray has self-doubt. It's just right away with him, it's just something's up with this cat. He's way more three-dimensional than than he even needs to be, and so it's very it's inviting.
Well, he has cool glasses and a thong too, which makes as a visual signifier goes, is pretty striking.
I think there's something to that of he has cool David Cross thick glasses that look like sunglasses, but he has those and a thong. And Roast Beef, who is the depressed cat, has nothing. He just looks normal. I think that's a real. Maybe accidental reveal from Onstad of oh, it's just normal to have severe depression and anything else is wacky.
Yes. Yeah, he introduces himself immediately with the depression. They lead with that. I was impressed by that.
He's an interesting character. They do, I mean, this is part of why I was like drawing the line to Simpsons too, or like Simpsons will take all these like, you know, like almost stock characters, like Barney. You know, like Barney. He's like he's a drunk, and then they will. What I think is funny about it is then they'll like introduce all this dimensionality to the characters, and it's like he's drunk, but he's sad, which now doesn't seem crazy, but in like 1990, it was like, oh my god, to make the drunk sad instead of just like a comic relief drunk is like. That was groundbreaking at the, I assume, I was 2, I don't know, but like I'm told
same.
it was groundbreaking at the time. So like roast beef sort of functions like that, where he just leads with like, I'm depressed, and it seems like he's not going to go anywhere with it other than that. And then the amount of specificity they get into with his depression, which like not to brag, I don't suffer from, so I don't know, but like there's no way that he was just like inventing that whole state. Like it's so specifically drawn, like the one where he gets a new shirt. And then he imagines all of his friends yelling at him for like putting on airs, and so he buries the shirt. It's like that's got to come from an authentic play. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Onstad's brain.
Well, I think I have read stuff supporting that. So what are the characters that you gravitate to? We talked about Todd or Ray. I mean, is there anybody that we haven't mentioned that you gravitate to?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, Ray and Roast Beef especially are just like, those are two of the great characters. And their relationship, it's like, they have this relationship that's just like a certain type of dude that like, I have that, I've been on both ends of that relationship hundreds of times in my life. We're just like, you know, you grow up with a guy, you're close with them, you know each other, and you're like brothers, but you're not. Like I mean, they say like we've been boneheads since old times, I think is like how or knuckleheads since old times. It's just like, yeah, that's it. You're just dumb together. It's like these guys that you're just dumb with, and it's like you feel safe being dumb with them. Is like, that's a very, I don't see that depicted, or I didn't at the time. I've seen it more lately, but like that's a cool, yeah. So I'm drawn to that. I really liked Vlad the robot, he never goes especially deep, but that's fine with me. His personality is just like horny Eastern European guy, which like that's fine, that's okay.
Yeah.
And then some of the like Nice Pete, I think is like got some really like, he's just got some beautiful writing. Like he's written as one of these like sort of verbose Southern guy, you know, the way they like talk on gemstones sometimes, that's sort of like what's the eloquent, he's got this like Southern eloquence to him while he's also describing like killing people, and like he's a serial killer.
Yes.
And then he just like is out of jail for most of his run. Like I think he's a really interesting character. Cornelius Bear, as soon as like Onstad hits a point in the writing where you can tell early on Cornelius is just like a joke. He's like, oh, he's this stuffy old guy. And then Onstad hits a certain point where I think he realizes he's like, wait, I actually love Cornelius. Like Cornelius is cool. They all look up to Cornelius, and then he gets like really good. Then he's a really well-written character. Yeah,
he has. I focused a little bit. I put brackets on 2007 just to see sort of what Time was writing about when they named this the best graphic novel. 2007 ends with Cornelius. Cornelius Gets a Tattoo is the name of the arc, and it's him just waking up with Star Wars written on his chest, and then it's just panel after panel of him like sobbing and ripping at his skin. It's haunting.
Yeah.
And so the 2007, if it's about anything, it's about Roast Beef getting engaged and Ray reckoning with what it means for the guy you've been knuckleheads with since old times, to be entering this new phase of his life. Is that something that sort of appeals to you, the deepening emotionality, or is it just, you know, are you there for the jokes more?
Oh, it's both. I think you don't get, I mean, I honestly, that Cornelius Star Wars tattoo thing is like, that's like Achewood distilled. I mean, you know, you can't distill it. It's so wide and, you know, like broad scoped and whatever, but like, it's all there in that strip of like, what's the joke? I mean, the joke there is that like he got a tattoo, and it's just sort of a joke on like, yeah, the Star Wars logo is ugly. That is like an ugly look. I wouldn't want that on my body.
And a bad place to put it, yeah.
Yeah, in 2007 especially, it's like, oh yeah, Gen X nerds were sort of like taking over culture at that point, or they had taken over it for a few years at that point. But is this sort of, it's almost like rebellious in 2007 to be like, no, I mean, later we learned we were, you know, I think the Gen X nerd reckoning has happened at this point. We're like, yeah, fuck you guys. But like in 2007, it was a pretty like bold move to be like, yo, this is ugly. the iconography you guys surround yourself with is hideous, and a cool older guy would hate that. Like, I think there's like there's some real teeth to that strip, but like, but it only works because you care about Cornelius, and there's like some characterization there. So it's like they both need to exist in community, or it's sort of like it's just like a better than average gag strip without it. So like, yeah, because I feel I'm way more on the Ray end of the spectrum than the roast beef. I've had friends like that where it's like, oh, fuck, you're growing up without me. Traitor. Fuck you. I hate you for doing this. Like, it's not the most flattering picture of me or of Ray or of guys but it's very relatable. And so it's like, yeah, all of the jokes in that and all of the, he's really good with pacing too. It almost feels like, the thing I always think of with that storyline is there's like a week of the same gag over and over again, where people keep showing up for the wedding, and the way they find out that oh no, roast beef's dad is in town, or his brother, I forget who it is. I think his brother's in town, because they read in the newspaper, it's like, oh my God, these 3 crimes these petty crimes, they all line up and they all point to my brother must be in town. And then they do it with roast beef's dad, and then they do it with Todd is back in I forget who comes back into town, but it's such a fun, it almost feels like an action movie, but it's just for a depressed guy to get married.
Sure. The way that the time dilates too is really weird, to read this all at a binge and know that some of these storylines are going across months. You know?
It's weird because you're reading it, binging it, you're sort of in the actual timeline that the characters are in. So you're moving through it correctly. But there's this weird, I feel this way with television, especially animated television where the characters don't age. There's this very strange dilation of time where you spend more time with the characters than they conceivably would be able to spend with themselves.
True.
Because you're spending, Bobby Hill. I've spent more time with Bobby Hill at the age of 13 than he possibly could have spent being 13, Right. So it's like, God, I really get to know him, and you get to spend all this extra time. And then you get a week sometimes in between strips to chew on it and sort of sit with them. So you're growing up while the characters are just sort of sitting there. So this is this is interesting because that storyline is one of the first storylines that I was reading in real time. The rest of it, Great Outdoor Fight had already happened, and I was just getting caught up on it. And it Great Outdoor Fight feels like it happens in 2 hours,
Yep. I read it in about half an hour, and then to look back and go, oh, that was a month or 3 months of storytelling.
It's the whole summer is the Great Outdoor Fight. And it's weird because it's, in the time of that strip, not a lot of time has actually passed, but then they get back and everyone's treating them, they're like, oh, welcome back, it's been a long summer. And it's just because both are true, Onstead knows what he's doing. Both are true. It has been a short amount of time, but in reality, it's also been a long amount of time. And when they come back, the summer is over. We're not going to just because in the timeline of the comic, it ran for how many? 15 years. Something it would have actually gotten through maybe 2 years of their life. It would have been 2003 at the end if time actually dilated like that.
Sure.
But I don't know I don't know if there even was a question. I just was sort of expanding on it. But it's weird. Weddings don't take that long. It's a whole week in real time to watch a 15-minute ceremony.
Right. Yeah. It's something that feels sort of uniquely webcomic-y about it, I guess, the playing with your audience out over that. I mean, it's, in newspaper strips, obviously time was dilating, and Bloom County was having its own similar little side adventures. But I don't know, 2007, it's locked in for me as a time of webcomics, partially because that's just when I was reading them. But it feels like there was a cultural currency to some of these things that maybe that there is less of at this point. Does that sound fair? I'm in webcomics now. Nobody cares. I care very much, but
thank you. But your average guy, Joe Guy on the street he didn't care. It's fine.
Yeah, I was looking at the list of Comics Talks 2007 major webcomics, and I don't know, some of these maybe could I rapid fire a couple of these at you and see if you have a take on these. Perry Bible Fellowship was their number one.
Huge. Loved that.
Yeah. XKCD, if it wasn't, one of those was 1 and one was 2.
Oh yeah. I know that I never liked it. I mean, and I wish the guy long life. I had no problem with him morally. I hate, it looked bad And it just appealed to the exact kind of guy that I like wanted nothing to do with. In my, later these guys became like Reddit guys or whatever, but like that kind of, I just had met enough of those guys and found them annoying. And I was like, oh, and you like that? Like, well, then forget it. And I've never given it a fair shake.
No, I think that is fair. And he did a parody of Achewood that you can hear Onstad talk about. I just put like an umlaut over the O in Onstad now. You can hear him being baffled by it. And like, I mean, it's flattering that you would parody me, but also why are you working this hard to sort of get your licks in?
Yeah.
They seem, it seems the sensibilities seem opposed a little bit. How about Dinosaur Comics? Was that one for you at all?
Love Dinosaur Comics. That was fun.
That's the sort of the absurdist angle of things, where it's literally the same images every week, and only the text changes, and also was weirdly deep and serialized about after a certain point. Yeah,
it was a very, I guess I just love that of like, it's a gimmick. It is like I don't even mean that disparagingly. It's just like, it's the same drawings over and over again, but then over time, it's like the relationship between these dinosaurs, like really deep. And I think the fact that it is just text, like the text just becomes like more and more beautiful over time.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of his.
Nice. And then there's two that I almost group these in my head, and maybe they're completely different, but Questionable Content and Penny Arcade.
Penny Arcade I definitely was familiar with. I liked the art in it, but I didn't play video games, so it was, I'd say 95% of those strips, I just was like, it sounds great. I have no idea what you guys nerds are talking about, but like, sure. And then I fell off with that, and I haven't, probably it's been 13, 14 years since I read a Penny Arcade strip, but
sure. I
just remember it looking nice. That was like my one feeling on it was like, oh, this is beautiful, sort of.
Yeah. So there were a couple of attempts to adapt Achewood for TV. Have you seen any of like the sizzle reels? Yeah.
It's surreal.
It's borderline upsetting to see it all in motion. But so you have adapted a webcomic for TV, and I was just curious sort of how did that process work for you to take something that was in this one form and move it into something that is different?
I had a much easier time with it. For a lot of it is just to be completely frank, and I'm not fishing for anything here. It's just a lack of success on my part made adaptation much easier, because there's not this huge back catalog of Swan Boy talking, and it's just written text, which means the more and more and more and more of that you read, the more his voice solidifies idiosyncratically in every single reader's head. And so it becomes harder and harder and harder for him to have a voice. And there just wasn't a huge backlog of Swan Boys. And it wasn't a super, we made a TV show. It was a little successful, not to brag, but like it certainly wasn't at the level of Achewood, which meant that there just was a smaller number of people who even were able to visualize his voice. So vocally, just to start with that, like vocally, it was way easier to cast it and to sort, because it's like, you're making less ripples because the pond is small. The pond of content is small. Content is such a gross word. You know what I mean, though? Like the pond of the strips is smaller, so there's less space for ripples. And also, I voice him, so no matter what, I just sort of had this trump card up my sleeve. No matter if anyone has a problem with it, it's like, well, fuck you. I was writing it the whole time. You're wrong. I'm right. That never came up. But I was ready. I was ready to fight somebody on it.
Good.
The other thing that made it really easy was... easy is one, but I was working with an animation studio, Augenblick Studios, who I loved, and I got to pick them, and I already knew what they did, and they knew what I did, so it was like I was able to just like talk to experts about it, and like, well, what do you recommend? Like, I thought I wanted to do it this way, I wanted to cast in this way, I thought backgrounds could look like this, and then people who had made a million cartoons could tell me like, oh, this tends to work, this tends to not work. They had also worked with people who had adapted comics before, and so they knew a lot of the like, okay, comic artists tend to ask for this specific thing, and it never really works the way you want it to. I was doing a good example of this was like I was doing thumbnails and storyboarding for Swan Boy. And I got taken off of storyboarding pretty quickly because storyboarding is difficult, and we had to get actual storyboard artists to come in and do it. But I continued to do the thumbnails, which are like the pre-storyboarding. If this is too in the weeds, let me know. But
no, please.
That's like the pre-storyboarding phases. You just like you make quick little thumbnail. You almost just like make a comic strip, and it's like this is what this episode's going to look like. And really quickly, Aaron Augenblick had to explain to me, he was like, hey, all of your characters are off center. And I was like, oh, weird. I didn't realize I was doing that. He was like, so comic artists do this sometimes. They're off center. So because in your brain, you're leaving space for dialogue bubbles.
Sure.
Those don't exist in animation.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's simple as that, of like little tweaks like that with people who just like were experts in the field made it. So I was like, I can just listen to smarter people and they can just let me know, how to do it. But also Swan Boy is a little bit based on a lot of television that I had watched already. So like the jump from like into adaptation, I think was like a little bit easier to make. Whereas something like Achewood, I don't want to speak for Onstad. I have no idea what that process was like for him. I would certainly struggle to make Achewood into a TV show because one, it leans so hard into the form of being a webcomic that like the language is beautiful to read, but reading and hearing are two different things.
Yes.
It's like, so adjusting that dialogue, you would lose so much of like the spark and the magic to just make it like legible for television, because it's so much of the episodes of Achewood, if you think about if you were to faithfully bring them to television, it would just be characters standing around and saying these like beautiful dialogue to each other. But visually, they wouldn't, and that's part of the charm of Achewood is they are just it's very rudimentary, it's very simple designs.
Right, yeah.
But in television, that's tough to do. A show like King of the Hill does that very, King of the Hill's designs are very simple in a certain way, and it leans into like it's almost like an anti-cartoon in certain ways, and like, that's tough to do. You need experts to do something like that, and like that is the team I would want to get behind an Achewood adaptation. And it's like, well, then that becomes complicated because like that's expensive to do. And then Achewood, if you're a TV producer, it's like, well, has it made enough money? And I don't, and I don't know how a TV producer thinks at all. I have no idea what goes on in their brain, but like I would assume that would be like part of the. So I don't know. I don't know how you would adapt it successfully to television. But all of that is to say, they're weird. The voices are not the voices I had in my head, and they're this sort of like 3D design that like, it's a cool idea, but it's very contrary to like what makes Achewood as a comic strip charming, which is the flat visuals.
Yeah. The most upsetting thing for me was hearing Philippe talk like an actual 5-year-old, which Philippe is kind of my character. I love the sort of the innocence set against the sort of how rude and crude everybody else is, but having Philippe have the voice of a adult sounding like a small child, I assume was really upsetting to me. It's like, it's like if we learned about Philippe that way for the first time, it would maybe be different. But yeah, it's like anytime you watch that, you've got years and years of Philippe in your head, and you can sort of, part of the joke of Philippe is it's disturbing that he's around Lyle, or that he's around Libot. Like, he shouldn't be around these guys. They're a bad, especially Todd, like the bad influence on a 5-year-old. But also, he's this like holy fool, Philippe's always going to be fine. Like, but yeah, when you hear the voice come in, that sort of disrupts all this like years-long backstory where it's like, you can just sort of fix it in your own brain, and then when you hear a voice, you can't really fix it in the same way. Yeah. Yeah, it's I am with you. It's rough. Good. So maybe just sort of like last thing, unless you have stuff you want to throw on the bonfire. Sure. So when Onstad stepped away from the strip, he partially talked about, and this is something that I think you can almost see in the 2007 arcs, is sort of a contentious relationship with the internet. He's really interested in doing stories about the way that the internet can sort of fuck up the way we communicate with each other. And he wrote, when he was at least doing one of his hiati, I don't know, that internet presentation seems to devalue content. So much art, writing, and news is suddenly available to us that each piece seems nearly a throwaway. And he felt this immense pressure from his readership to, I don't know, sort of deliver exactly how they wanted to be catered to, and this lack of patience. So what is your relationship, I guess, to the internet as a creator? Do you feel any of those pressures that he was talking about?
I mean, he's right. He just like completely called it. If you look at like the binge model of television, it's like, well, I don't want to watch that shit. Like, even if it's a show I like, it's like, well, now it's slop in front of me. Like, I don't want, like, maybe wait a week, get me involved. I mean, I think he was dead on. I also know, like, when I was originally started reading Achewood, the comments were on. Like, there was a comment section, and you could just read the comments, and it's like, why would you do that? Why would you allow? Now, we all know better than to do, but it's like, I guess at the time, it's like, you want to seem fan-friendly or whatever, or maybe you just want to be fan-friendly. Like, and, we've learned, now we have, like, words like parasocial, which is, it's on the cusp of just becoming a synonym for bad, but, like, it's a valuable word if you use it correctly, of like, yeah, you can't, you can, but I don't think it's healthy to make art in conversation with fans who are not, I love my fans, blah, blah, but like, they're not making it. And so to give them a creative seat at the table, which it sounds like a lot of like what he was getting frustrated with, or these expectations, or it's like, well, fuck you for having an expectation. You make a comic if you have all these expectations, like, even like, fuck me for talking about him on a podcast like this. It's like, that's got to be a violating feeling for him. I'm more sympathetic to him potentially listening to this than I am to me talking right now. It's like,
fair enough. Yeah.
Like, yeah, that would drive me insane to hear somebody like analyze Swan Boy like that. It's like, God, if he's listening, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, that's, oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. Oh no. But like, I'm a big fan, but like, I think what he's talking about of this, like, I'm making something, and now the instant I feel this all the time with comics. It's like, I dread posting. I dread sharing any of my work, because it's like, well, it's not, I don't care what some guy who replies to me every time I say anything. I don't care. I mean, like, I hope he lives a long time and he's happy. Like, I care in that regard, but, in the abstract. But, like, I don't want to hear what you thought of this comic. That's not why I posted it. I posted it because otherwise I was wasting my time. I posted it so eventually I could make more money, or I could put it in a book, or I don't know. I can't even define why I posted it. Maybe it's unhealthy, but, like, it certainly wasn't to hear like immediate feedback from. So that's the last thing I wanted. And like, yeah, I think that's a very valid reason, because I'm also aware of like what he does now and like what he's up to now. And he's been writing like food reviews for the Portland newspaper, and it's like, that sounds, he still gets to write. I know he also, towards the end, he got way more into writing these blog posts of these characters. And they're like, they're beautiful. I mean, it's like, if you haven't read those, you're only getting half the story. Like, they're these incredible, like, really well thought out and fleshed. It's like a novel. He wrote like a novel, like several novels worth of stuff from these characters. And like, yeah, I think towards the end, he just was more into writing than he was to like making a webcomic and like putting it out into like the content mill. Like, yeah, I don't blame him. It's very dehumanizing, and it's very easy to feel. I feel like this all the time, where it's like, oh shit, I just made something to just like pop up on someone's timeline for a second. Like, what an awful feel, It's like, I might as well just be a freak at a circus.
Well, should we leave it there? I think we're not going to get a better
sure, yeah. Quote. I started in a great mood and I worked myself down. I'm sorry to do that on your show.
Well, I can gas you back up if you want to talk again about all of your credits. Is there anything that you'd like to plug or promote?
Oh, hell yeah. Now we're back. Definitely listen to Rude Tales of Magic. If you liked me on this show, it's very different. It's a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, but it's fun. Also, if you're listening and you're like, I don't like Dungeons and Dragons, neither do we. We never learn the rules. You'll have a blast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't listen to any other actual play podcasts, if that's the term, right?
I think something happened recently, and like, I don't think we get to call ourselves actual. It's not. It's like an emo or or it's like,
sure,
nobody claims it, but it applies to a ton of bands. Like, I think we cut. There's like a critical mass of like actual tabletop gameplay that we cut. Like, we cut the dice rolls and shit.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So I think at a certain point, it's like, well, it's not. There's. If you're, it's not jazz if you're not doing this or whatever. Like,
sure.
We might have. We're into a different. I think it might just be like narrative fiction or something. But whatever. Only nerds care about that stuff.
Yes. Well, I mean, what you guys do is it's so unique and it's so remarkable in the storytelling that you are able to do in this huge expanse of time. How long have you been telling the current arc? Is a few years, right? And
it's like 2-3, almost 3 years now, 2.5 years.
And you've covered a few weeks in the characters, a couple of months, I guess, in the characters' lives, right?
Well, this is another. So Achewood was a big influence on Rude Tales, to be honest. Like, that sense of story, that sense of world building, of like, all right, something stupid has happened. You know, the great outdoor fight is like the big arc, right? And it starts because Ray makes like a truck nuts company.
Okay.
Like
yeah,
that,
right, yeah.
it's, you know, it starts there. And if you just keep drilling down, there's always going to be something interesting with this like intricate, so I think of like, I hope, I don't know if I don't know if it's hitting on the same level or whatever. That's not for me to say, but like, certainly it was a big influence of like, oh, I made a stupid joke. Or Carly made a stupid joke. She made a great joke, but my jokes are stupid. Like, I made a stupid joke. And then we just keep, like, we build and we build and we just keep committing to it until we've arrived at a place that, like, well, you couldn't get here any other way other than, like, driving the stupid car. And I think that's the Achewood influence.
Driving the stupid car, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like to direct anybody to anything else?
Check out Root Tales of Magic, my book, Hell Was Full, wherever you get your books. It's available. Swan Boy. Oh, yeah, definitely watch Swan Boy. And it would be very exciting if we got to make more. If you wanted to tell FX you're a big fan of Swan Boy and you're missing more episodes, certainly wouldn't hurt.
What a Year is produced by me, Ethan Warren, with original music by my co-host Ryan Pollie. Thanks to Brian Rosemeyer for the mixing and mastering, and Shane Butler and the good folks at Portray Me for our artwork. Please take a few minutes to follow us on your podcasting app of choice, and while you're doing that, if you could leave a quick rating and a review, it really does make a difference. On our next episode, we'll be talking about Guy Madden's My Winnipeg and Beirut's album The Flying Club Cup, plus the music video for Justin Timberlake's What Goes Around Comes Around with guest Sydney Urbanek. It's going to be a good one.